My name is Carrie Beeman, and I am an NF mom.
My name's Holly Beeman. I'm 15 years old, and I was diagnosed with NF1 when I was 2.
I said my daughter has all these spots, and that was the first time I heard a cafe au lait and heard that she might have neurofibromatosis.
Recently, I started getting pain in my plexiform tumor.
I would like NF research to be on the forefront. You know, our children are very important in this world.
I think I definitely hope more drugs or more medicine can come out that can help stop tumor growth. There's one FDA-approved drug, but it's not always a good option for everyone.
She's doing a great job advocating for herself, and that makes me so proud as a mom.
I mean, I'm old enough now to understand what I'm going through and make decisions for myself, but when I was younger, I couldn't do that, so it was up to my mom to decide.
I mean, she is resilient. She's powerful. She's beautiful. I got so many adjectives, I don't even know. I always want to be there for you. I'm always going to be a mom, but I'm so proud of you, Holly.
Please welcome Kate Keltz and Chelsea Koch.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2026 NF Summit. My name is Kate, for those that don't know me, and on behalf of my entire CTF team, I want to say how excited we all are to be here with you today. I want to start just briefly by pointing out several ways that we're working to make this event as accessible as possible to our entire community. So every session will have live captions and reserved seating in front of the screens for those who need access to those captions. We're also providing ASL interpreters throughout the event, and as well as Spanish interpretation, which is available. And if you need that and don't know where to find it, please talk to our tech team in the back of any room. Our hope is that your accessibility needs are being met. But if they're not, I want to encourage you to talk to our accessibility navigator. There will be a CTF staff person assigned to this role every day. And right now you'll find her right here in our green vest so that she is easy to identify. So please don't hesitate to talk to her if there's anything that you need in order to make yourself more comfortable, to make the event accessible in any way. It's very important to our whole team. I want to briefly thank our sponsors for this event, our NF champion sponsors, Alexion and Springworks. We're grateful for their support. I also want to thank Gondola Bio, who's one of our bronze sponsors, as well as Colbeck, who is one of our supporting sponsors. And really a huge thank you to every sponsor and exhibitor who's here and has filled our exhibit hall. Thank you for being a part of this event and for being involved in this important community. So now I'd like to thank my planning committee, and I'm actually going to invite up our chair for the NF Summit this year, Dr. Chelsea Koch, to say a few words. And as she joins me, I'll say that I also had fantastic patients and patient representatives that were a part of our team. And that included several really great folks that Madeline Ogle, who could not be here today, unfortunately, was a part of that team. McKinnon Galloway, who is here, and a big thank you to her as well. And Rebecca Bielecki also is here, and they were a huge part of putting this content together. So welcome, Chelsea. Have her say a few words.
Thanks, Kate. My name's Chelsea Koch. I'm a pediatric neuro-oncologist and NF clinical researcher at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And I can't express how honored and excited I am to be here to both chair the conference with Kate and have the opportunity to meet so many amazing individuals. Last night was such a fun kickoff to what I hope will be an amazing couple of days. And it's so clear that CTF has had such an amazing impact on our community. They truly have helped my career as a clinician and researcher, and now I have such an amazing opportunity to see the impact that they have for each and every one of you. So I just want to thank everyone for taking the time out of their busy schedules to come to Denver and to have fun, to engage, to learn, and to advocate for ourselves and our community. And I hope you have a great couple of days. So thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. You can go back down. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Koch. Although if you call her Dr. Koch, she's going to tell you to call her Chelsea. So I want to just take a minute to say a few words before we jump in to our morning. I've had the privilege of planning this event for the last 8 years, and I've been with CTF for almost 12. And I'm telling you, if this is your first time at this event, or maybe first time in a long time, there really is magic in this room. There's the magic of connection that fosters belonging and knowledge that builds empowerment. There's a reason that we call those living with any form of NF fighters. And it's because this is truly the bravest community that I have ever had the privilege of knowing. So I want you to take a moment, look around at your fellow fighters, advocates, caregivers, care partners, and decide right now, what will brave look like for you this weekend? Will you say yes to making new connections? Will you raise your hand to ask that question during a session, the one that everyone's probably wanting to ask? Will you join the NF registry and find out how you can be a part of moving NF research forward? Maybe you'll raise your hand to get involved with our walk program or Cupid's Undie Run. And yes, we really do have a charity arm that involves running in your underwear. So whether this is your first NF event or your 150th, I am confident that you will find what you need right here in this room with this community. So whatever brave looks like for you this weekend, don't miss it. You're going to find it here. Okay, now, I want to do, next we're going to invite up Miss Allie Norton. So speaking of Cupid's Undie Run, Allie is our National Ambassador for 2026 with CTF, which is a very fun role. So let's have a round of applause for Allie. Perfect, thank you. Okay, we're going to have a little get to know you with Allie. So Allie, I know you as an advocate and a fundraiser and a community builder from Dallas, Texas. And many of you may be already all familiar with Allie's work with Cupid's Undie Run. But even with all your involvement, this is your first summit.
It is.
So I would love you to tell us a little bit about what are you most excited or hoping to get from this weekend?
Yeah, I think just like everyone here who has been here several years, or this is your first, this is a time where I'm just really looking forward to hearing all the updates that have been happening in the NF community, and then hearing everybody's unique story as well.
Awesome. Okay, so you have spent years building community in Dallas through Cupid's Undie Run and advocacy work. So what does it feel like to walk into a space where everybody knows what NF is and they really get it? What does that feel like for you?
I think it's just really cool because although we are all here for one purpose of learning and connecting on the basis of neurofibromatosis, we each have our own unique story, and being able to share those with one another but somehow still understand it is truly just something that is indescribable.
Yeah, I love that. So you're actually speaking later this weekend in one of our sessions called Adulting with NF. What's one thing that you've experienced about living with NF as an adult that no one really talks about?
We're still just adults. Adulting's hard. And, you know, like you said in your opening speech, we are fighters for a reason.
I love it. I love it. Yes, adulting is hard.
Yes.
I agree. I agree. All right. So, Allie, I have one more question for you. Are you ready to play my favorite game show, N or F?
I am. Let's go.
All right. Everybody, a round of applause for Allie. We're going to play a little game up here. All right. And we would love audience participation. So the way my game works is that I'm going to give you two options, an N or an F, and you have to choose, and you can't choose both.
All right. Let's see if we can do this.
All right. We're going to start with an easy one. Nachos or fries?
Nachos.
Oh, okay. Okay. I like it. I like it. All right. Next question. And audience, please feel free to participate if you want to yell out your favorite. Here we go. Night owl or first at breakfast?
Night owl. Yeah.
I heard the night owls. So we'll see you at the bar in the lobby, later tonight. I love it. I love it. All right. So if you walk into a conference for work, are you there for networking or free swag?
Networking.
Oh! That's great. That's great. Networking. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. Okay, hopefully we're giving some good swag at our event, hopefully.
I mean,
okay.
it's a nice alternative.
Yes, of course. So next one, no plans or full schedule?
Full schedule.
Okay, I like it. I know, I'm a calendar girl too. I love it. Okay, since we're in Colorado, here's one for you. Nature hike or fancy restaurant?
Fancy restaurant. There we go. I love it.
We have some disagreement among the audience. Yeah, but I'm with you on the fancy restaurant. All right, here's a good one. Are you here for new knowledge or friends who get it?
Sorry, friends. I'm here for the new knowledge.
Oh, if you're one of Allie's friends, hopefully that didn't hurt your feelings. I love it. Okay, last question of our game. Here we go. Are you coming into this weekend nervous energy or fired up?
I am fired up, and I hope all of y'all are.
I love it. Let's have a round of applause for Allie. Well done.
Love it.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Allie. So now Allie and I are very pleased to be able to bring up our fearless leader, President and CEO of CTF, Dr. Annette Bakker, for our keynote session. So big round of applause for Dr. Bakker.
We're coming as a group. We're coming as an entire. So good morning, everybody. This room is incredibly full. I've never seen so many people at the NF Summit. So thank you for showing up so incredibly numerous. Thanks, of course, to our sponsors, and to Be the Difference, who has also sponsored quite some of the people to be here today. So we have an interesting pickle here with my two favorite people. It's where there is a will, there is a way. So before we kick off, I first would like to ask my friends to introduce themselves, and you will immediately feel the energy that these women bring to the panel. And so let's start by quick introductions.
Well,
Dr. Lewis Hall.
When you get to be my age, there's no quick introduction. My name is Freda Lewis Hall. I'm a psychiatrist by background and training. Spent a number of years on the front lines of healthcare in health manpower shortage areas and at universities, and then spent the last in the pharmaceutical industry. That's about 3.5 decades. With my first job being at Eli Lilly and a series of roles, and my last as the Chief Medical Officer at Pfizer.
Hi there, my name is Michele Oshman. I'm the Chief Patient Advocate and the Senior Vice President for Alliance Development at Bio. Bio is an association that represents the biotechnology industry, and I'm incredibly honored to be here. My background is, I started off as a clinical researcher and went to pursue my doctorate of pharmacy. And then I missed a lecture, and that resulted in me being on maternity leave. The grown-ups will understand that's a joke. But then actually, as I was going back to school, I found a wonderful colleague at Eli Lilly and Company, where I had been doing some clinical research, who hired me, and I spent 18 wonderful years there. To be totally transparent, you'll learn this tomorrow when we have our fireside chat in the morning. Freda is one of my mentors and genuinely one of the heroes throughout my career. So I'm so honored to be on the stage with her. And of course, Annette is someone I've learned so much from and has such incredible energy. So I'm really honored to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. I appreciate everything that you all have brought to the conversation, and really look forward to it.
Thank you so much. So today what we want to do is, first of all, we don't want to make drug developers out of you, but we thought that it was really important to give you some insights into how do we get from an idea to an approved drug. Because there are these two opposite opinions these days, is that one, people say it takes a very long time, and then there is some other people that are kind of launching that idea that you find the next drug between the ham and the cheese in your fridge, and then the next day you can take it and be cured, right? So we just wanted to kind of give you some insight in how do you get that idea that you have that might be a good idea to solve a disease or at least treat a disease all the way to a medicine. So Michele has volunteered to present a couple of slides to get the conversation going, to get you some insight and let you a little bit under the hood of what it actually means to get a drug from idea to medicine. Then afterwards, we will have a conversation on how can we crush those timelines, those costs, the failures. And so Freda and I have been working on some things in the past that you will hear about. And then what we really want is we want to open the room. Please ask all the questions you have, because the end of the day, the whole goal of this is that you feel that you're part of this process and not sitting there to wait it to happen, right? So Michele.
Yeah, so I like to do this at the beginning of any talk that I deliver and try to assess the audience, and so I'm gonna do this so that I can actually see you. So raise your hand if you are a family member. Fantastic, that's awesome. Raise your hand if you represent the biotech or pharmaceutical industry. Awesome. Wonderful. All right, and raise your hand if you are really an expert in drug development and know all about it and could come up here and give this talk instead of me. Okay, I shouldn't even be up here, but okay, so we're gonna go through a few slides. I'm gonna give a few acknowledgements. It's gonna look super corporate for a minute, but just bear with me. So how did we get here? If you are a grown-up of a certain age, you'll remember there was an amazing song called Once in a Lifetime by the Talking Heads, and the whole theme of it, how did I get here? So how did we get here? Why do we have an FDA, and why is drug development so highly regulated? There were two seminal events, and I don't mean to freak anyone out because these are way long ago and they're not gonna happen again, but in 1938, we didn't have antibiotics, we didn't have a lot of different kinds of medicine, so a lot of medicine was delivered in sort of elixir form that might have been compounded, not necessarily regulated, but delivered because there was some evidence that it might work. And back then, there was strep was going around. People were feeling sick. And so folks were taking a medicine that had some curative effects, and that's great. But then they decided, you know what, kids can't take this because it's not a liquid. So let's make it a liquid medicine. So what they put in it, for anybody who is a pharmacology chemistry geek like myself, to sweeten it was diethylene glycol. So if you know what that is, you're probably freaking out. I would be. Diethylene glycol is the primary ingredient in antifreeze. They didn't know this at the time, but they tested it for smell, and it smelled like it'd be sweet. Somebody probably did a little tongue test and knew it would be sweet, didn't realize the effect it would have on the human body. And so this drug was sort of made popular, got out the door, lots of people took it, and 633 vials of this were shipped around the country, and over 100 folks died, including pediatric patients. And this is really tragic. This is something that certainly was a very big aha moment. Now, today we can all look back and say, what do you mean medicines weren't regulated? What do you mean there wasn't some oversight body making sure that everything that patients were taking was safe? Well, again, this was nearly 100 years ago, and very fortunately, we are well past that. So that was when the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act was first instituted, as it were. And this said that drugs have to be safe. You have to make sure that they're safe in the population in which they are intended. And so we go forward, 30 years, and things are going pretty swell. And then there's another situation. Thalidomide, which had appropriate clinical uses in many different disease states, was tested on animal models and shown to be safe. It was also tested in the target population, so the patients were intended to take that medicine, and I won't go into all the details of who that was. It was never tested, though, in people who were pregnant, women who were pregnant. So what happened was this drug was really good at making folks not throw up, right? Antiemetic is what those of us in medicine call that. This antiemetic was prescribed, and those of you who've ever, been around a woman who is expecting know that there's a lot of nausea involved. And so this medicine was given to the patients, these women who were pregnant, to prevent them from being nauseous, and there were a number of congenital anomalies that resulted from that. So this really resulted in the standard then for FDA of saying efficacy. So a drug has to be safe, but it has to be effective in the population intended, but we also have to look at it overall for safety. So just because a medicine was approved for, in male rats doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be safe in pregnant women. And even to this day, a lot of the work that I lead at Bio is around pregnancy-related medication effects. So I want to give credit to Merck. I don't know if anybody from Merck is here. This is available on their public website, so you can take a look there. I'm going to talk you briefly through the journey of a molecule from the lab to patients, as it says. Pretty self-explanatory. But creating a medicine, a vaccine, it's a journey, right? It always starts with patients in mind. I have been around scientists for the better part of 30 years, and I've never met a scientist who wasn't doing the work they did because there's a patient at the end of that cycle, right? At the end of that experiment, at the end of that drug journey, there will be a patient who benefits, and that's what we all hope for. From scientists, you've got data analysts, you've got courageous trial participants. This is it's a long, long process. So I put together this timeline. You don't have to memorize it, but I share it because a lot of what Annette is going to talk about is crunching this timeline. So right now, it can take maybe up to 12 to 15 years to develop a medicine. That's too long. Patients are waiting. We need to find a new paradigm. The discovery phase, which is when the folks in the clinic are doing all of their sort of brainstorming, the ideas come about. You don't necessarily have a target that you're aiming at until you identify what that target is. And then you're testing a lot of medications against that target. So when I say target, I mean usually a specific molecular site at which a drug will work. A lot of times in the discovery labs, you'll see that folks are generating all kinds of cool molecules and ideas without a specific disease in mind, but understanding, okay, this is an anti-IL-17 antibody. That means it will have some effect in the cytokine cascade, inflammatory disease, autoimmune disease. So let's narrow things down and see if we can get to that target. Similarly in neurofibromatosis. So discovery, from the time you have your discovery, which is a little confusing, it's at the end of that discovery phase. So you're already about 4 years in by the time you have discovered something, and when you can claim that as your intellectual property. During that discovery process, you have about 10,000 compounds that you're testing against to get to 5 compounds roughly that might end up in humans, or at least in preclinical testing. And for those 5 that do make it into clinical trials, the likelihood of FDA approval, like that drug making it all the way to the end, on average is 12%. So we in the biopharmaceutical industry are playing an odds, a sort of an odds game, as it were. And unfortunately, the technical probabilities of success are very, very low. That doesn't mean we stop, though. It doesn't mean that we stop trying. So we get into preclinical, which is after the discovery stuff, and I won't go through all of the various components of that. But about 1 in every of those 5,000 molecules that we looked at in discovery, only 1 is going to genuinely, most likely, come out of to be a medicine. And really only maybe 1 is going to come out to be the one that we test in humans. So preclinical, a lot of animal testing, toxicology testing, looking at how the medicine is metabolized and distributed. I'm using 2 big words, I'll stop. So again, we talked about the timeline. So then we get into clinical. Raise your hand if you or a family member have ever been in a clinical trial. Awesome. So keep your hand up if you are the individual who was in a clinical trial. Okay, I want everyone to give a huge round of applause. Because you're heroes, you really are. And it's an exciting time in medicine, but medicines are being developed because of you and your courage, your generosity with your time, and the treatment team that's working with you, all working together to make sure that you had this opportunity to be in a study. So thank you. So if you're in a study, there are 3 different phases. Again, not going to spend too much time here. Phase 1, healthy normal volunteers. Phase 2, patients with the target disease, a relatively small population. Phase 3 are your large confirmatory trials. So if you're looking at a drug that's, or excuse me, a disease that might be relatively common, say rheumatoid arthritis, your confirmatory trial might have 5,000 patients in it. If you're looking at a rare disease, it might only have 6 or 7. So there's a wide range there, and that contributes to the relatively wide range in timeline. And I know I keep coming back to this slide, and it's not just that I'm lazy, but you know, because I really spent a lot of time on that slide. I just didn't want to, like, I had to be honest with you guys. I'm joking, you know that, right? Like, I want you to feel okay laughing. This is supposed to be fun, and I know I'm being super boring. But this timeline phase by phase, again, at the end of the day, because you've been courageous, we hope to have a medicine out of it. And the last thing I'll say before I turn it really over to Annette to talk about crunching the timeline here is that, I'll skip that one, skip that one, skip that one, really is this one, the patent clock. So there's a business reality that once you've made your discovery, about 4 years into your tinkering molecules in the labs, you have to issue a patent on it. Otherwise, it's not going to be protected, intellectual property protected, as you do the research and then go to the commercial market. If something's not protected, then anybody can copy it, and that's not sustainable. So I bring this up not to necessarily bore you with a bunch of legal speak, but really to share that time is our enemy when we're doing drug development. Time is our enemy when you're a patient or a family member waiting for a therapy to come out. And so I really want to emphasize that as we turn things back over to our fearless leader to talk about crunching that timeline and moving forward. Thanks. Oh, that's not right. I did the wrong one.
Thanks so much, Michele. This is super interesting. Oh, I feel like I'm echoing. So, yes, crunching the time is exactly the objective of CTF, because it is, yes, the patent clock is ticking, but we, as this community, we don't want to waste a minute. How can we make this time shorter, reduce the time, reduce the cost, reduce the failure rate? So I'm going to talk quickly about reduce the time, reduce the cost, and then I'm going to pass it over to my neighbor to talk about how we can reduce and crunch the failure rate. So by reducing time and cost, one, we are very interested in collaborating with the research community and with the patient community, because if the patients are part of our partners in the research, if you realize that to recruit patients for a clinical trial, it takes on average between 1 and 2 years, right? And in rare disease, 30% of those clinical trials fail because they can't recruit the patients in time. That to me is because the patients are not involved in the clinical trial design, in everything endpoint development, in everything that matters to you. You're not asked. You just get a dish in front of you, and you can say, okay, and then they're like, now you're invited to be part of the trial, but here is your dish. And I always say, I get this dish in front of me, but I don't like mayonnaise, so I'm not eating the dish, which means you're not signing up for the trial. And that's a huge waste of energy, of money, and of opportunities. So one way to crunch the time and the cost is to very early involve the patients, and that the patients feel part of the community, feel part as research partners. And so the 2 things that Kate is leading is, one, the NF registry, So sign up, so you're part of this community, you're part of the solution. And number 2, CTF engage. If you want to know more, talk to Kate, but that is really a way where you as patients are asked what matters to you and your loved ones for clinical trials. The second way we crunch time is something that we're doing in collaboration with our science team. Irene Morgenstern and John Puses are leading that, is to say, okay, and what if a company has a drug, but they have no idea, and especially in rare disease, they have no idea what is NF, they have no idea where the models are, they have no idea where the researchers are, they don't know. So they're going to spend a year to 2 years doing the due diligence and figuring out which models are needed, which models are the right ones, which models decide and really translate to the clinic. All those things, we are crunching that by saying, you come to us, we are your one-stop shop. There is one person at the foundation who is the expert in preclinical and can tell you, go here, go there, don't go there. So that, of course, is also a huge time win for the companies and a cost win. And then the last thing I wanted to say is, okay, now we have the drugs that are selected, what they call clinical trial candidates, which are the drugs that now can go into the clinic. And then the last phase, what we did is to say, okay, instead of for every drug, write a new protocol, clinical trial protocol from scratch, finding the centers, finding the patients, developing the endpoints, blah, 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 the whole thing, which takes up to sometimes 2 years to write that thing. Why don't we create a protocol that stays on for 10 years? Because we know, if we're looking at tumors, we know we want to shrink tumors. So why don't we just say, okay, this is our master protocol. All we want to do is shrink tumors. We know which patients we're looking for, patients with tumors. We know which centers are treating these patients. So why don't we create this protocol? We keep it on for 10 years. And when companies come with a drug, they just plug in the drug into that existing protocol. It is a new, very new concept, but we have now 3 that are, one for NF2, which has been up and running now for a couple of years, and that has led to a drug that is now in the cancer guidelines. The second one is a platform trial, which is not platform basket, but it's still a platform trial for pain and schwannomatosis. Both of them are led by principal investigator Scott Plotkin. And the last one is one that we just finished building in Europe for NF1. Again, a platform basket trial across Europe. So that is one way to crush time. Now, I want to pass it on to Dr. Louise Hall to talk to us about what else we did to crunch the time. And she and I are super excited about it.
We are very excited.
We're a little obsessed, but okay. I don't want to
just
steal
a little?
just a little.
Okay. So I too am so excited to be here, and both Michele and Annette did, I think, a fabulous job of explaining what our challenges are in this space. I have to share very briefly. I was on vacation, and I love swag too, so whoever was saying the swag, yes, I'm in. And I was sitting, by the pool, and someone came over and asked me if I worked for the company that was on the swag, and I said very proudly yes. And then he went into a very heart-wrenching description of, as a family member, what he was going through, waiting to get treatments, how long they took, and on. And so I explained everything that Michele explained. It takes $2.6 billion on average, this many years. The failure rate is very high. And I went through all of these very important points that I lived for decades. And he didn't blink, and he looked at me and said, yeah, sounds like you all need to get better at what you do. So, so I said, you know what, challenge accepted. And it really got me thinking about what I'll call the waste in the system. We've talked about the time that it takes, the investment that it takes, the people that need to be involved in it. And one of the questions that we had was, how do we crunch that, right? And Annette just described some, but we had another idea that we were really excited about. And that was, what if we took some of the things that had already made it through and had failed, not for safety reasons? So what is some of the things that were put aside were shelved or put in the basement that was a result not of the safety of the product itself, but how quickly it worked, whether it was better than something else, whether or not the manufacturing problems had been solved. There are, you know, kind of a litany of things.
And that's one thing I didn't go into, but again, going back to that timeline slide, that's an idealized situation in the slide, right? That the drug is doing well and everything moves through. If there's a safety issue, obviously the drug drops out of the pipeline. But all along that continuum, the sponsor, the company that's making this drug, is evaluating about 1 million factors that are not only clinical, but also business reality, environment. Has a new competitor already come to market? Is there a problem with the patent? It's not really something that we'll be able to justify our IP. So there are, you know, just like anything, there are a lot of reasons things might come out of the pipeline. And so this conversation now is really about taking those pieces. And by the way, did anybody else catch what Annette did? So crunching the timeline, children's tumor, CTF, that was like very cute. I thought that was good. She didn't think any of you caught that. Anyway.
So the idea is there are, that what happens in this course that you just witnessed is that things fall out along the way. They're put in the basement, they're put on a shelf somewhere, but they may have promise, either in the original disease that they were intended for or for other diseases. So the question that I had was, what if we could pull some of those out of the basement? So when I was at Pfizer, I was gifted with the opportunity to do a process, to take a look at what we had as shelved assets and to see if any had near-term potential, that they'd made it far enough along, that the data was good enough, that we may be able to pull those out and put them in a special or unique circumstance, maybe in a new company, another company, in the hands of investigators that could begin to put the resources around them and make them happen. And so we were able to, we laughingly said that Annette held them and I hit them. Sometimes I held him and she hit him though. And so that was a partnership. So we found, because we realized we needed several things. First of all, we needed the commitment and the support of the company. You don't just take those things out of the basement. You have to have access to the data. You need people who understand the data and can make it useful moving forward, can answer questions about it. You actually need the drug in many cases, because who's going to make it if you hadn't? So do we have enough, or do we have the capacity to make some more so that we could actually do the clinical trial? So there were, you know, many questions that we asked. We ran through those questions and we found another number of these drugs or potential drugs that we could move forward. And one of them was for NF. And we were able to find investors that were willing to take a chance on this small group of 4 assets to move into a new company. We were able to get Pfizer to agree to support that. We had over 150 volunteers within the company that kind of worked nights, if you would, helping to pull the data together to make it in a platform that would be useful and on and on. And then we were able to pull together all the things that Annette just talked about in terms of volunteers that could help us think about how would we move this forward? What are the important things for us to consider from a patient and family perspective? What about the investigators that we may not have been familiar with because we weren't working in that area, that we were able to pull together through the efforts of people like the ones here, but also all of you who may be aware of and able to introduce us to and pull into this mix. And as a result of all of this work, pulling together the experts, the patients, the funding, and a group of leaders that were willing together to come in to work in a new company, SpringWorks was born. And as a result of that work, Gomekli was born. And so we are excited about that for the success of it, but we're thrilled about it for the model of it. So how do we do that over and over and over again? Not one disease state with unmet need at a time, or one company at a time or one investor at a time. How do we think about making this a part of the system, the way that we work? And we know there were hundreds of assets at one company that we looked at. That has been repeated at other companies, so that we now know that there are thousands of assets that have been further along in this process that we can pull ourselves together around, think about how we might meet unmet need with those, and then put all the things that you need to move them forward together, the experts in the science, patients who have the insights, investigators who can do the work, money, because it has to be supported, the drug, and on and on and on. So getting that together is such an exciting opportunity for us. And the one thing that I didn't mention was the regulatory pathway. Michele mentioned it a couple of times, and it is critically important. And so if we think about how to move forward in areas of unmet need, first of all, there's a lot of regulatory experience in, quotes, common diseases. But in the era of rare disease and personalized medicine, which makes every disease rare, because it's what I have, how are we going to meet those needs in a system that is intended for big, not small, or more general and less specific or personalized? So we have some real opportunities in front of us that I'm excited about, obsessed about, and hopefully we will, with your ideas, your questions, and your help, be able to move some of those forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, can I add one quick thing to what you said, Freda, is maybe just to help you understand, regulatory means that you get the drug where the FDA says this drug works and this drug is safe, right? So I just also want to send some love to Alexion, AstraZeneca, at that time, because I can tell you that they were brave enough to say, we're going to get the very first drug approved for plexiform neurofibroma, inoperable plexiform neurofibromas in NF. And that also helps the other companies, like SpringWorks, to go faster, to crunch the time, because the path was smoothed. And I think what we need now, and this is where I think organizations like CETF will have to play an important role, is we need to get one drug approved for every manifestation. Because once you have a drug approved for a manifestation, there is a lot of companies that are like, okay, we know now what you have to do, which steps you have to undertake to get this drug to approval, but that is where we will still have to come in. Once we have that first drug approved for a manifestation, the companies will compete, and it's good competition. So let's just also thank Alexion to help us here. And I wanted to throw out one thing, Freda, you said there were 150 volunteers in Pfizer that help you make that happen. That is not a scalable solution. You can find 150 volunteers, maybe twice, maybe 3 times, but then not anymore. So now, one of the things that the pickle we have to solve is that today in pharma, it's nobody's job to out-license or to make sure that these drugs that are in the basement that have so much value and that have hope, that these assets get out of the companies into new companies. It's nobody's job. People get bonuses on in-licensing, they don't get bonuses on out-licensing. So I think we need to have communications because it's not because companies are bad. Companies are our partners, but we need to figure out a way to incentivize the world to think different about these assets that are, as you always say, I love what you say about shelved assets, maybe. No,
you do it.
Go.
Because I stay in trouble about it.
Okay.
I want to do my system one, so you do the shelved asset one.
You go.
While they're talking, I'll just
while we're talking about who's going to say.
Every shelved asset, you're shelving hope.
Yes.
That's your quote. Okay, Michele.
So, but to point out, there's a very big difference between shelved assets, which is what we're talking about today, and repurposed medicine. So a repurposed medicine, just to be clear, is a drug that has been approved by the FDA for a specific disease, or indication is the word we use when something's approved for a thing. It's approved for that indication. And sort of reviewing it or looking at, what Freda loves to say is we torture the data until it confesses,
and let it confess.
Let it confess. So a lot of post-marketing data may be collected and say, wow, this drug actually might also work in this other disease. It might not be something that company was going to invest in, maybe because the patent life is short. But that's a different process, and there are a lot of organizations like Every Cure, Freda is on their board, that are doing that. But shelved assets are a really wonderful opportunity, and I really love how you've referred to it as not repurposing, but purposing. Yep. So we're talking about purposing, not porpoising, not porpoises, purposing, which is not really a word, but we're making it a word.
And what I want to underscore is that this is the one I get in trouble for. So I said about 10 years ago that, and I got in some significant trouble for it, is that we have Star Wars medicine, but the Flintstones system. And so the question is how to turn the system into a Star Wars system. How do we? Right. That would be the other part. So if we think about the purposing aspect, what if there were 5,000 assets, which we are, because there are, that can be identified as shelved assets. So these are not approved and have been stopped. But they've
gone through some level of scrutiny already.
Yes. Yep. So they've been, they're not sitting in the basement because no one's ever really looked at them. They've made it along that continuum that Michele shared with you, but were stopped for some strategic reason because there wasn't enough time, people or money to move those forward with all the other thing that the company were doing, but some of the other things that Michele mentioned would cause you to shelve an asset for a period of time, if not forever. So the question then becomes, what can we do collectively so that this does become a system, that there is a home, if you would, for the knowledge and information about shelved assets, that we could then begin to build a fit-for-purpose organization around. If we're using AI, for example, in understanding how the mechanisms of diseases. So we now know this, and it turns out that we know that mechanism is in play in another illness that we didn't know before. Can we take some of the drugs that affect that mechanism and move them over here and begin to research that? Is there a way that we can make that the way that we do business every day in the space? And I feel like it's a tall order, but one worth tackling. And we've met and are beginning to align, we hope, organizations, institutions, and individuals that are excited about that. And we hope that you'll be excited too, because a part of that platform is going to be you as a collective, ready to raise your hands, as you've already done, to say, I want to help increase awareness. I want to participate in a clinical trial. I want to give some insights into what these experiences are and what would make us better partners to this process. So there's an opportunity, I hope, and the enthusiasm that I felt outside at the tables and as we were talking about other things, that this will be something to tackle as well.
And maybe just to bring it down to, I think the best example of repositioning was Viagra, right? I mean, I think everybody in the room knows that Viagra originally was not exactly designed for what it's used for now. But that's an example of drug repositioning, right? I just thought that this is an important example to give.
Yeah, I mean, PDE5 inhibitors were initially developed as hypertension agents. And whenever you're in a trial, those of you who've been in a trial know, your study coordinator or the PI asks you at every visit, any side effects, anything that, whether or not it's related to the medicine, anything you've experienced in the last week that's unique or different. And so based on a side effect of, that particular medicine, they realized that there was an opportunity to pivot and move toward a different direction. Same with minoxidil, which is used for hair loss. It was repurposed or redirected. I think the other thing to just mention is many times a medicine, it'll come out of discovery. It's it's patentable. That's great. You go into your sort of preclinical research. It looks like a fantastic drug, but you get all the way into the first in human, then phase 2, and you realize this drug has a good safety profile. It's met all these criteria, but it's not working for the condition we thought it was, and so it's really difficult for a company at that point to sort of justify continuing research. If they have backup indications that they were thinking about, they may explore there. But to Annette's point, if that drug just doesn't have a future within the portfolio that company has, and again, publicly traded companies are owned by the shareholders, right? They have the responsibility to maintain viability, to protect that return. There's really not a significant incentive for someone inside that organization. That's why it was 150 volunteers. I will tell you that I know of situations in which companies have genuinely tried to give away their data so that someone else can benefit from it, and there's not an easy pathway. So my own CEO used to be the CEO of a company called Amicus, and they had a drug that they were looking at in a rare disease. And once you've done a clinical trial in a rare disease, as all of you know, you've really kind of exhausted a significant percentage of that patient population. You can't go back to the same patients and ask them to be in another study, especially if you're in a situation where there are only a couple hundred people, maybe a couple thousand, or even fewer than 10,000 folks who live with that particular condition. And through a lot of tenacity and courage, was able to say to a competitor, here, take what we did and learn from it. And that's the data, not necessarily the medicine, but the data, so that the next time you come up against something, hopefully you'll be the ones to find that cure. And that happens all the time in biotech, small biotech and rare disease. And part of our vision is to really support that continued perspective and really support the large companies who have these assets that really may not necessarily be thinking about, how can this be a business driver to support both the large and small sort of ecosystem.
Yep. No, exactly. So that is exactly why, to your point, I always say in rare disease, we don't have the luxury to compete. We don't. There's few researchers, there's few patients, there's few clinicians, there's few of everything, and there are 12,000 rare diseases. So if we want to be the most attractive rare disease to our partners in companies, the only way we can do that is by crunching those timelines as much as we can, so that we can show the companies that if you partner with CTF, you will get a faster answer. And just to use the example of SpringWorks, we actually did in 7 years from the idea of creating a company to an approval and to an acquisition by SpringWorks for $3.4 billion with an original investment of $100 million. So we have shown to the patients the value, we have shown to the pharmaceutical companies, we've shown the value, and we've shown the value to the investors. So now what we need is more Fredas. So I wrote an op-ed a couple of months ago saying, where are the other Fredas in the pharmaceutical industry that are willing to stand up and say, let's do this. It's a good idea. We have these drugs in the basement. Let's do it. And I have been talking a lot to a lot of companies, and I can't wait for companies to open a door. So companies, listen.
But I also want to underscore this because for years and years and years, rare diseases have been talking about their rareness, the way in which they are different. I think that you and this organization in particular brought a new dimension to this by talking about samenesses. So how are we similar? How can we work together? How can we partner? And it's those similarities that allow us to look in the basement and say, well, you know what? This might be an interesting mechanism for this particular disease that if you had blinders on and were not thinking that way, you may not have noticed that. And so I think that that opening yourselves as an organization to others, listening, sharing, creating a model for others to follow, has really been an important driver for this kind of work where I think together we're going to be able to do this again and again so that 10 years from now someone's going to look at it and go, well, that's not surprising. That happens all the time. So I'm excited about the possibilities.
And I think we're also really building a prototype for personalized medicine. I still remember when I was in elementary school, I had a little friend of mine who had leukemia, and the kid passed away. There was one leukemia. Today, there's 114 different leukemias, and there are a lot of those that are actually cured. So we are turning leukemia actually into a rare disease. So that is why I think we really have an opportunity to build this prototype and to say, okay, we're building this prototype for NF. Our patients should benefit first. But then everybody should benefit from this prototype so that we can actually just start doing personalized medicine for real now. And instead of looking at $50 billion markets, we're looking at $50, $300 million markets, because that is what our investors have to start thinking. They have to shift from the GLP-1 $40 billion to the $300 million, many $300 million markets. So anyhow, I think shall we open it up for questions? What do you guys think?
Absolutely.
Sure.
You want to add, Michele?
Well, so a couple things. So crunching the timeline. So we have children, CT. So what's the F word? Get it? What's the action verb starting with F so that we can match the acronym? And I think it's the future, right?
Oh, I like
so
it.
crunching the timeline for the future of how people living with NF, how people living with any rare disease, I think we can move forward. So the CTF is advocating for CTF. I think that's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
There you go. Let's do it. Shall we throw out questions? Please don't be shy.
And you can ask any question about anything related to drug development or how the industry, maybe approaches some of those things. If anything, you think might be helpful for yourself and the audience. And we can't see anybody because we're being interrogated by the FBI. It seems like up here.
Who can manage the room? Because I've seen. Yeah. Okay. Just go, Rini. I think it's Rini, right?
Hello.
Oh,
It's work. Look, it's just very short. Hi. My name is Yulia. I have a child with NF. I had Annette, as I was listening to you speak, you used a couple terms that I didn't understand.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask about them.
Yeah.
What is a platform basket trial?
Okay. So normally, if you do a clinical trial, you take one drug, you decide what the drug is going to do to the patients, and it's a very linear way of thinking. Okay, so you say it has 2 shrink tumors in plexiform neurofibromas only, so then your entire trial is designed to only do that. And then there is a couple of what they call secondary measures. Is the pain better? Are there functional benefits? Blah, blah. A platform basket trial is actually, you have, in NF, you have multiple tumor types, right? In NF1, you have optic pathway glioma, low-grade glioma, plexiform neurofibroma, cutaneous neurofibroma. Those are all, let's call them the benign, as much as I hate the word, but those are the benign tumors that could benefit from similar drugs. So now you have this, so your basket is these 4 different tumor types, okay? Your platform is the drugs that you can give is you can have, Koselugo, Gomecli, but also other drugs, right? So, and then basically what your platform are the different drugs. So what you do is you have your drug and you say, okay, instead of only deciding that I'm going to give this for low-grade glioma, I now are randomizing this drug to low-grade glioma, optic pathway glioma, cutaneous neurofibroma, and plexiform neurofibroma. So actually, you create a platform with multiple drugs, basket with multiple indications. And we have exactly the same in NF2 with meningioma, vestibular schwannoma, non-vestibular schwannoma, and ependymoma. Again, different tumor types, and you randomize your drug to these different tumor types. So that means that in fact, in one trial, instead of having only one answer, you actually get 4 answers. So that is why this is way more efficient than a normal traditional trial.
Great. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Then my other question was, what is a manifestation? You said you said that people should start like focusing on creating.
So a manifestation is how the disease presents. Okay. So optic pathway glioma or low-grade glioma is a manifestation of NF1, or vestibular schwannoma is a manifestation of NF2, or pain is a manifestation of schwannomatosis. It's how the disease manifests itself in the patient.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is it Michele? It's Michele.
Yeah.
Okay. My last question was for you. You were talking about a company that had a very difficult time just wanting to give away its data, to share it. And so I'm wondering if Bio has thought about creating some kind of data exchange, so creating the mechanism by which, say, all of your members could share data.
Thanks for the comment. It's definitely something that we've been thinking about, and really our Bio's annual convention took place just a couple weeks ago, and the focus of that convention is scientific partnering, which means lots of business folks come and they try to in-license molecules from places. But I think that the idea here is to create a system for the out-licensing. But it is, in these specific rare disease instances, we actually do have something we're working on, and we are working with a few companies on it, but I can't really talk about it. But I think I would just say great minds think alike. So someone on this side?
Can I just add, though, to that one? There are a number of organizations that are working on accumulating data or providing a platform for shared data, because companies could use a place to do that, but also government agencies, universities, investigators. So to
CPAP,
have,
the Critical Path Institute has a very robust program in partnership with NORD that they enable that data collection, that sort of data exchange. And so part of what we're working on is how to do some storytelling around that enables the companies to recognize that opportunity is there. So,
but there is also one reality here, right? The companies are also in competition, right? And everybody is fine that Shell and Gulf are competing in the gas and oil business, but in pharma there is a little bit that taboo that you can't say that these companies compete. And although I am a fan of collaboration, but sometimes I'm also a fan of competition. When there's a little bit of competition, let the best one win. And I can tell you a very simple story. When I was, years ago, when I was still doing my PhD, I was calling the local phone provider in Belgium for my telephone. It took 6 weeks to have a phone. And I was like, okay, that's not too good. Then I went abroad. Years later, I came back. I called again. It took 24 hours to get a phone. And why? Because there were 5 companies. And so I think sometimes you need to balance collaboration and competition, because when there is only collaboration and everybody shares anything, then you take away some incentive. So I think we need to figure out the right thing, right? The right balance between competition and collaboration.
Yeah, and it's really about risk, right? I mean, I'll tell you that another company that went through this, the CEO told me there were more lawyers in the room than scientists.
Oh, yeah.
So risk tolerance is also part of it.
Oh, yeah.
But I want to add the other part, which is the work. It's, you know, if I have X number of employees and their jobs are in various areas divided across these 100 compounds that are currently in development in our company, that we're actively working on, that we've hired people to work on, that we're spending money on, that we have investigators lined up, that patients are being enrolled, that, you know, that manufacturing sites are being built, and on and on and on. When someone comes and says, excuse me, can you please share these, you know, huge sets of data with us? Can you make sure that they are cleaned, that they're in the system that we need to share it in? That companies are looking at you like, you know, we would love to do that, right? All these other factors aside, but that's not our day, you know, that's not our day job, it's our night job. And so I think we have to work on creating platforms, processes, and opportunities that manage through how many lawyers you have to have in the room and how much competition and, you know, what the hurdles are for what data is.
Exactly.
But also the platform has to be manageable so that you're not asking the company to take itself away from what it's doing, for the shareholders, right, their obligation on day-to-day and the diseases that they're actively working on, to do something else. So I think we have some work to do, back to the system, right, providing a platform to make this manageable. And right now it's a little overwhelming, I think, for people to try and do the things that we need them to do.
Well, and
Okay, let's stop yakking because we have like 14 people out there.
Okay.
I'm there.
You mentioned that there are thousands of drugs on the shelf in drug companies. I'm curious if we have a sense of how many of those thousands could work for NF and what that means for NF in general.
Thanks so much for that question. So we did an analysis. There is about 30 to 40 assets that are for NF. Some of them have already some, as now you're all experts in drug development, preclinical data, which means enough data to bring that drug to the clinic. Some of them will still require some preclinical data. And tomorrow there will be a talk about our preclinical hub, which is exactly aimed at quickly evaluating these drugs in preclinical models to make sure that we bring the very best drugs to the clinic.
So my question, Vincent, by the way, NF1 parent. So my question is actually a follow-up on that question. So with 1,000 assets, which sounds exciting, does sound like there's a bit of a gap to where you have to spin out company. I was wanting to ask about, beyond crunching the timeline, what other things did you do in your journey to convince? Because this question is for Annette and Freda. Like, you stuck your head out and you had to convince a lot of people. Can you tell us a little bit about how you were able to get all of those stakeholders, you know, legal, business development, really just to, you know, not do something that wasn't their job?
Well, I think being a chief medical officer buys you a lot of sway.
It helps a lot. But also, there were compelling stories at the table. So essentially, we looked at some of the drugs that were shelved, and we made the case that many of these were in rare diseases, in areas of very high unmet need, and that we could potentially align all of the commitment for finding the right company or organization and researchers and others, finding patients who would participate in the trials, finding investors who would do it. So the inside was really passion, people who had worked on these assets before they were shelved, people who had a commitment to various disease states, either through the work that they had done in the past, family members, there's a whole host, or to patients in general, which is a very huge and real thing in the companies. But a lot of it was doing the work to line up to then be able to go back to Pfizer to say, okay, we got this. We have everything that we need to spin this out, ready to rock and roll. And we just need you to agree to this. And that was a much easier sell than to go in with the idea and to try to sell them on that. And the two things, one was, it was an interesting opportunity to talk to the investors about this. They were more enthusiastic than I expected, to be honest, because it was a rare disease. It wasn't this huge financial win that anyone was talking about. It was just commitment to invest in something that had promise that would make a huge difference in people's lives. And so to get those commitments lined up were very important. Once you could come in and say, okay, we need this, got it. It was a very different conversation inside the walls to get permission or agreement to actually get all of the agreements signed and all of the work done to get it done.
And I think there's maybe one additional thing to this is non-for-profit organizations have very often and for a very long time I would say, alienated to, okay, we will call you when we need to talk to the patients. For the moment you do patient support. And I think where CTF is different is that we have now a staff with all people that come out of the pharma industry and then some people that come out of the medical community. And we are really profiling ourselves as a partner in the entire ecosystem. Why? Because we do something that nobody else can do. One, we have a complete overview of what is happening in the NF field. We see what is happening, research-wise, clinical-wise. We know the researchers, the clinicians, the patients, we know everybody. We have the exact same sense of urgency as you guys, because our investors, donors, are people that are in it for their loved ones, and they want a solution yesterday. So we have the knowledge, we have the connections, we have the sense of urgency. And so, for example, for the very specific, this drug from Pfizer, I knew, because knowing what was happening in the field, that within the clinical trials consortium, there was already data collected in a confidential way that showed that this drug actually had clinical benefit. So that, of course, was a huge conviction factor in getting Pfizer excited about this, because that was really catapulting the entire system. And we know the clinicians, so we could get them around the table in 2 weeks to discuss the design of the clinical trial. So I think we have to rethink the role of nonprofits, and there are some nonprofits like the Blood Cancer United, like Michael J. Fox, like the former LLS, but also Michael Hunt with EB Research Partnerships. I think nonprofits are really pivoting from patient associations to patient-centric research foundations and being a real partner in the R&D ecosystem, doing something that nobody else can do. And I think that is still a reputation that we are kind of working on daily, and would love to work with our patients, because we also really see our patients as partners. I always say our patients are at the table, not on the table, right? So it's really a partnership across the entire ecosystem.
Good morning. My name is Mark. I'm NF adult now, parent of an adult with NF. And I think the question is mainly for you, Annette. It sounds like a lot of the drugs that are interesting to the CTF and to the NF community relate to tumor suppression, and very rightfully so. But there's other complications associated with NF, things like learning disabilities, etc. And so I guess my question is, are there any protocols established to look at effectiveness of these drugs for things like learning disabilities, or is that such a longer timeline that doesn't fit kind of the crunch the timeline philosophy, and maybe that's why it's not being looked at? So that's kind of my question.
Yeah, no, thank you. Very good question. So The challenge that, well, no, let's say the easiest way to get NF in the ecosystem was to focus on tumors, because tumors have to shrink, and it's something you can measure. It's very objective, it's very measurable, you can see it, right? So once we have now a few drugs approved in the oncology part of NF, what we see is that there's a huge movement now, and I can tell you that, for example, last week with our conference in this very same hotel, we had a session on pain. The room was packed. There is a huge interest in learning disabilities, but those are harder to measure. But we're doing now actually a preclinical study at the CRO to look if we can start understanding behavioral implications of NF. And I think that is where I believe AI is going to really help us, because we like to look linear, like for example pain, talking about Flintstones, right? How is your pain scale today? Oh, is it an 8? Are you sure it's an 8? I mean, what is that? So now today actually we're going to have a conversation with the schwannomatosis patients to say, and what if we do it a little more complicated and we look at endpoints? Because I don't know if you guys ever have been in real pain, but when you are in pain, you're doing nothing well, what you normally do. Your movement is different, your heart rate is different, you're maybe sweating more. I mean, I don't need to explain in this room what it means to live in pain, but can we start capturing that data, right? Instead of that linear scorecard. But yeah, so the answer is yes, but the other manifestations are more difficult to objectively measure. So that is in fact what we're working on now, is how can we turn these observations into objective measures, because that's what you need to get a drug approved. So you need to say it's due to the drug that X, Y, and Z are different than without the drug, right? So that's why this is more difficult, but you in the psychiatry field have...
Well, I just also wanted to add the importance of evolving this in partnership with regulatory agencies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'd say global agencies have become more and more global, if you would, so beginning to talk to each other in a very different way. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to begin to marry technology with the conversation that's happening between regulators, to be sure that as we develop these new opportunities, it doesn't take forever to convince somebody to adopt them. They're working with us to adopt them along the way, to shape it, to propose it, to shape it a little bit more, and then to agree with it as a part of the regulatory pathway.
Yeah. And just so to Freda's point, on August 5th, the Reagan-Udall Foundation is holding a day-long workshop focused on this. So, and just because I'll brag, because I'm not part of CTF, I will say that this case study is kind of known across the industry as like the CTF case study. So you all are in a really unique place with a fearless leader like Annette, who has really made this happen. So the conversation we're having today is very much a cutting edge conversation, because not every patient advocacy organization is having the same conversation as we are. In fact, none of them are. So that's pretty impressive for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
This entire team and this entire room. Because if you guys wouldn't show up, we wouldn't have this conversation, right? So thank you all for being here for this, my amazing team too.
So my question kind of goes back to what the first one was, but a little more in depth. So we have all these drugs that were like in preclinical before on discovery on the shelf per se. Is there an actual database of the platforms of these, maybe like a brief synopsis that is accessible for researchers, or, you know, is that something that we could work on getting to? Because I mean, to me, that's something that would be really big. Just have a brief, you know, synopsis of what their intent was, some of the outcome, if it got to preclinical, or if it's just in the discovery phase, we couldn't complete it due to X, Y, Z.
Yeah. So we just have the publication that came out in Drug Discovery Today to talk about the assets and have a database with all the assets in there. So that publication is just still wet. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the team with Irene and John are building this preclinical hub to very quickly analyze the data and make sure that we collect the data. And then there is a huge collaborative effort, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's called the NF Data Portal. That was something that we started in 2014 actually, when everybody was yelling at us. But now this is a massively collaborative initiative where both NTAP, the Gilbert Family Foundation, CDMRP, which is the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs, the NIH, everybody is sharing their data in one platform in order to make sure that we do exactly what you're saying, is how can we have that one place of truth where all these data sit together and where we can actually now extract what is happening. And we have one person on staff who is a medicinal chemist and a patent attorney who goes through the literature and couples to the new molecular mechanisms that have been published, couples the drugs that can actually be used for NF. So yeah, there is and then goes through company pipelines, and so there is a whole pipeline that we're in fact constantly feeding. We have now a Asana project actually that is listing, and I think we're in current active conversation with about 20 or 30 companies to get their drugs into NF. So yeah, the field is electric. What we need is the people, the companies, to release the drugs, and then we need to find the dollars, whether those are philanthropic or even getting the investors. It's, for the moment, there is still a lot of science here, a lot of financials here with the big investor companies. How do we bring these together, right? How do we create a pipeline? We have now a scientific pipeline. How do we also create a financial pipeline? So it's something we're working hard on. But happy to talk to you anytime. I just can't see you, so please come up to me.
My name is Rebecca. I'm a woman living with schwannomatosis. And mine is part question, part idea. So I would like to really figure out how we change the corporate language somewhat, because every drug company's end goal is helping people with some condition that needs treatment or relief. We need to start to talk about some of those shelved assets, not just as that, but potential opportunities. How do we get that language to the shareholders where they start to see people benefiting from some of these opportunities? So that's really my thought, and I think we need to figure out how to have those conversations with investors and things even earlier in the process so we really can make a difference. Thank you.
So I'll say I love the idea, and it's in action. Many of the investors that were our initial investors into some of the early companies that were doing purposing are beginning to tell the stories themselves, and they're doing it with their colleagues at various investor meetings, but they're also doing it with their behavior. So if you kind of watch the news, what you'll see is this investor group has now done a second company and then a third that they are doing this, that there are family office groups that are now looking at this as a platform for their investing, that philanthropic organizations and investors are getting together to co-invest in many of these. So within the investment community, they're beginning to have the conversation and create a language around what that looks like. And so, so yes, I would love to think about how we can get the voice in this room, also driving that with your own enthusiasm, but also with the investment community that you work with directly.
Yeah, but I think the important thing, and I really love your question, Rebecca, is if you make a problem a human problem, everybody's willing to help. And so don't forget that. Tell your stories. Make sure also investors, people that are, yes, some of them are in it for the money, but I can tell you that in my experience, 90% of the people that work in the healthcare sector are in it for the right reason, because they really want to help patients. There is always 10%, but that's everywhere. But if we focus on the 90% and really bring our patients at the table, with the people that make the decisions, you have no idea how much magic you can have happen. So please participate. Next year, conference and summit will overlap highly. So please participate, come, talk to investors, talk to pharma, tell them your stories. Everybody, especially in this day and age, I can tell you, people want to do good. People want to help. There is, with everything that is happening around us, this opportunity is even bigger. We have an opportunity to make people care more about us than there were a couple of years ago, because people want to do good.
Okay, I am going to be everybody's least favorite person and say a big thank you to our panel, but we are at time. But I want you all to know that both of these incredible women will be on stage again tomorrow morning, and they are all here with us for this weekend, and they love to talk, so please go up to them, ask your questions, keep the conversation going, and can we have a big round of applause for our